Ladies and gentlemen, welcome. This is the Efficiency Equation podcast, and we've got another exciting topic coming up today, and it's going to be relatively free flowing, which is how we have been doing our previous episodes. And we got the feedback, we got the impression that you folks like that. So, what we have for you today is we're going to summarize the learnings from a recent visit and a recent conversation with a customer that is moving from Excel to quote unquote proper production planning systems. There's a lot that we want to jam into this episode because a lot of light bulbs were going off for the guys, and it's just going to be an eventful episode. So, Eugene and Konstantin, welcome to episode 16. And how about you guys just quickly summarize what went on and what happened and why we're talking about this today?
Hey, Dan. So we've recently returned from a business trip where we visited a site and we looked at upgrading their process of production planning as a whole, meaning not just the scheduling part of it, but production planning, order fulfillment, so the integration of all the information with the shop floor operators, quality systems, TMS, the whole picture. And as the visit went on, we realized that it's important to understand the difference between just a simple upgrade where we're talking about taking somebody from doing their scheduling work in Excel and giving them some kind of disconnected tool and just digitalizing the process there. The difference between that and going with a full picture approach with digital transformation, where we are talking about connecting all their major nodes in the order fulfillment chain, in their supply chain and logistics, so that their employees see the information in real time and can make better decisions. So we thought that today we wouldn't necessarily talk about that visit specifically, but we would talk about this difference in general because it's important that plant managers, production planners, quality lab managers, and logistics managers all understand this.
Right, Eugene. And so, in this thought process, what is it that's been a recent learning or a big aha moment for you?
One of the interesting points that we realize that needs to be explained is that there is a big difference between focusing on just one particular issue somewhere and looking at the picture as a bigger picture that involves everything else, not just one particular narrow focused area of your manufacturing. That is what we want to focus on today to see how we can shed the light on the real difference between saying, I want this specific narrow focused area to be better and just do everything for it without regard for all the other areas that come into play in your manufacturing process.
Can we just talk about the current state of Excel? So you're talking to companies on the one hand who do planning with spreadsheets, and you talk to manufacturing plants who have more sophisticated or digitally transformed operations, if you will. Now, what are the main reasons that you see companies sticking with Excel? So if digital transformation were the cool thing that it is made out to be, why doesn't everybody just switch there? What's keeping companies in spreadsheets?
What I would say is that doing things in Excel allows people certain flexibility with what they're doing that might not be there once they go into a systematized process that is inside some tool that focuses on proper processes and proper handling of data. That is always the case because Excel is nothing more than an electronic piece of paper, right? So you can do anything you want with paper. You can draw any doodles you want, and it's all going to be fine, and the paper will take it. Similar with Excel. Excel is a great tool, but it has its own purpose. It's a tool to do all kinds of calculations and quick things and whatever it can do for you. But when you want to have a good system, a good process in place, Excel may be good for prototyping some of it, but you really want to go away from it to create a certain process that can be followed by anyone who you bring into the picture, because you also have to consider that some of your people will come and go, right? You don't have necessarily the same people running production planning for this, since we're talking about production planning, forever. You have people coming and going. And the more you have it as a good process in a good system, the easier it is to hand it off to another person to make them learn it and be proficient in it, rather than doing things on paper or Excel.
One thing that's important, I think, to talk about for the benefit of our audience here is just to give a brief overview of what we mean by digital transformation when we make this comparison. And just to make sure everybody understands it the same way, we're talking about digital transformation as a business strategy where businesses begin to treat their data as their precious commodity. What that means is that you start the journey with getting all of your information according to the phases that we've discussed with Walker Reynolds that he teaches the community about, with the connect, collect, store, analyze, visualize, and then there's a continuation from there with solving and reporting the problems. But what does that mean? It means we are connecting to the devices that are out there to get the information out. And where the devices are lacking, yes, of course, you can have humans provide the input. That's a sort of a precursory step. But there needs to be a discussion for a better, more reliable source of information across the shop floor, for example, because people tend to provide low quality data. One day it might be good data, someday it might be bad data. And when devices get the data, there is consistency, So once we get the data, we collect it and store it, and then we enable informed decision making. That's where everything changes. So the businesses are able to make decisions based on information they see in real time. And that's really what we're after when we talk about digital transformation. So now, to take it back to your question of talking about this Excel and doing something in Excel, usually what happens is Excel is designed to solve problems of one person. It's the person that puts stuff in there. And yes, we now see that you can have shared Excel spreadsheets where somebody puts something in and this spreadsheet lives on the network, and then some other user comes in and puts something else in, but there is no discipline enforcement around it. So it could work one day where somebody updates what they're supposed to update right away, or they forgot to update and they update it whenever, and you don't know this data that you're seeing in there, how accurate it is, how timely it is. So that's why when you look at systems, you get a completely different picture there. But when we talk about this narrow-minded focus versus the big picture focus, it's not even that. It's saying, okay, if we connect multiple departments and they provide all their data that comes into a big picture, that enables you to make decisions that you couldn't make just by looking at how do I go from this spreadsheet, in the case of production scheduling, to a tool that allows me to drag and drop and do things with work orders on the screen. If you just look at that, it's a different mindset with a different set of goals, right? So you have narrower goals when you try to just solve that one problem versus when you get the big picture view. The difference between them, obviously, is in how impactful the results are, right? So what do you think, Eugene?
Yeah, I very much in agreement. And just like you described, the going to a tool is a step in the right direction, but just going to a tool will not get you those additional steps that you mentioned when you talked about digital transformation, and that probably would start with analyze, visualize, right? And finding patterns and reporting and solving issues. Those other steps, they are not just by the virtue of using some tool that addresses a narrow focused area, but rather to look at the whole holistic approach of everything that's working together, and not only having the right system, but also having the right understanding of what you're after. Like we've been talking about, the mindset is very important in here. Having the proper targets and goals of not just saying, I just want my OEE number to be this. Do the right thing and see the OEE number hit higher marks. Don't try to focus on the outcome by itself, but rather focus on the improvements in the process, and then see that transform your OEE numbers and all the other indicators in the proper direction.
Since you mentioned the OE, I think we need to spell out the differences in the goals in these two approaches, just to kind of bring it home here. When you are just looking at improving the scheduling process itself, you are looking, okay, I'm doing this in Excel right now, and I'm gonna introduce some kind of tool, and what is my result that I may get here? That the person that went from Excel to the tool is happier because of what? Because it might be more comfortable, convenient, it might allow you to do some of your work faster, right? That's about it. This doesn't say anything about operational improvements where at the end of the month, you know that because of this initiative that you just completed, the whole factory is running better somehow. There's no direct connection. When you're looking at digital transformation and this holistic view, you enable transparency that leads you to looking at your OEE and asking the right questions. And besides that, you have your RFT, right, first time, and you have OTIF, on time and in full. So those three metrics, and they aren't the only ones, by no means. There is also a mean time to repair and other things that are very important. But with the key three metrics, you could say, okay, I would make a bet that all three would improve in a number of years when you are focused on digital transformation as opposed to just a short-term solution to improve the life of a planner. Why is that? Well, that's because when you have the holistic approach, you are going to see that when your OEE numbers are there, something is off. If you see across all the important departments, then you can figure out where that problem is, root cause analysis. And that problem might not be in the immediate view of a production planner. So if you were on that siloed initiative, you would have never seen it. But when you look holistically, you will see it because these things will be on your radar all the time. And so just to give an example, so if we're talking about OEE, we have availability, performance, and quality, right? In availability, we're looking at downtime. So you have planned downtime and unplanned downtime. I will tell you that both of those types of downtime will see an improvement if you're focused on digital transformation. The reason is that unplanned downtime, the one that comes from the operators, when it's scrutinized, tends to improve because the business managers will come back and say, well, we used to do things this way. Now, how about we do them a little bit better? And so we minimize that downtime on the operator's behalf. Planned downtime, that's the downtime that the planners bake into the schedule. That initially may be slower to improve because people would say, well, we just don't produce on certain days, or we just take these breaks because we have to. But when the management looks at the whole picture and learns that, hey, if I just tweak this and I reduce my plant downtime, the throughput of my plant is going to be much greater, and we're going to make everybody happier and make the shareholders happier, then yes, they will reduce the plant downtime. They'll find ways. And it's just through mere scrutiny, and then we have performance. In performance, they will look at what the output is and ask questions. Is that normal? What we're seeing, is that good bandwidth? Is that good output? They might see that, hey, we're running these industrial deodorizers, for example, and their nominal throughput is X. It could be 60,000 pounds of product an hour, but we're only seeing 40 as an output, or 35,000. The question would be, why? What's contributing to it? And that's where you're going to go in and analyze all the different types of downtime that you collected, lay it maybe in a Pareto chart, see which ones contribute the most, and figure out what you can do about them. Then when you look at the quality component of OEE, just by looking at it and asking the question, what's wrong here? You're going to find more answers. And once you find them and you put in the improvements, then your quality component is going to go up. And all three of these together are going to drive up your OEE. And when we talked about quality, there's another one that's RFT, which is closely related to this. And Eugene, you may fill in on how RFT is going to improve just by looking into it.
Yeah, so RFT, right first time, is when you have a product made through whatever or on whatever line of equipment, and the product comes out the right way, meaning quality was good and performance of that production run was also good in terms of the target output of the equipment. So not just quality, but the whole thing is right, and it's right from the first time once it's made. Obviously, if you have any issues with the output product, your RFT suffers. Why do you have issues? Or potentially why you could have issues. Could be different factors such as raw material quality, improper execution of the equipment itself with the wrong parameters, wrong product was fed in. It could be a whole host of issues. But knowing the data, having all this data collected and analyzed in a proper system, allows you to see those issues, understand them, and work on improving, your production. So in the future, your RFT gets higher, and you have fewer issues with rework, fewer issues with running the equipment, and making sure your quality samples are analyzed in proper timing intervals, so that if there is an issue, you catch it early, and you don't have to necessarily rework the whole batch that you just made. All of these things work together, and they basically allow you to use those data pieces to see how and where you need to pay attention to improve your production, and hence to improve your metrics. Obviously, that's hand in hand. One important thing I wanted to add to this is that we were talking about all of these different components and data collection. The thing that comes next, and I guess it's a very fancy thing and on everybody's mind, is once you have all these things together, the really next step of digital transformation is this finding of patterns. But how, right? You could say, well, you can find patterns using, just humans looking at data, analyzing it, running all kinds of reports and dashboards. But you can also go one extra step and say, how about AI? Well, to use AI and machine learning effectively, you really need to collect all that data. You really need to make sure that you collect as much as possible from many, many different areas of your overall production, overall manufacturing. You do not want to focus on one thing. Focusing on one thing narrowly will not allow you to use machine learning or AI as effectively, or at all in some cases, is when you looking at the whole picture holistically and saying, I want to collect everything from everywhere, the least amount of human entered data as possible. You want to really make your bet on the devices rather than humans in this case, to minimize the error in the data. And then you have a real good data store of all the points that you've collected. Now you can go to those final steps in this digital transformation where you can actually find patterns using humans or AI and machine learning, which is even sexier, right? And then using the output of that analysis, you can resolve the issues that you might have, or if they are not necessarily issues, but then improve what you already have that's going well. So those are the points I wanted to add.
That's awesome. You guys really got into the deeper end of this entire topic, but I want to just rewind for a minute all the way to the beginning of our conversation when you started talking about digitalization, and digital transformation in general. And I think what would be super useful for our audience is if, like, once and for all, in a concise way, we were able to highlight what the main difference is between just digitalizing stuff versus actual digital transformation. And this is a hard question because, like, everything you talked about is about digital transformation, but just so that people will take this, like, one sentence with them, or this 3 sentences with them that is really memorable, that they can use inside the plant to explain people, okay, what we're missing if we're not going down the digital transformation route is this, and what we're doing is not that because of that. Is it possible to just wrap up these key differences in one concise thought or answer?
When you talk about digitalization, usually you talk about initiatives, projects. The big difference here when you talk about the digital transformation is that it's not a project. So just let that sink in. It's a strategy. What does that mean? It means that the business is embarking on the journey where they're going to do multiple initiatives. They're going to work on those initiatives to bring these pieces together to create a digital enterprise. What does that mean? Well, you have companies like Tesla and Amazon. And in Amazon, you have different parts of the company communicate with each other through the systems, and paper is eliminated. And there was that story about the famous email from Jeff Bezos in 2006 or 2007 that he sent to his employees saying that from now on, we're not going to do any transactions on paper. Think about that. There are companies that are leading the charge. In their case, it's all digital enterprise. All the entities are connected and sharing information digitally. So they've realized that data is very important to them. And so when we bring it back to your question, it may require a slightly different explanation if they're talking between themselves as plant managers versus if they're talking to the operators that see these things and work with these things day in and day out. But I would say at the operator level, it's all of what you're working with. We're going to capture that information and we're going to make that information available in real time to the right people at the company so that they can help you do your work better and have fewer resource constraints, and so that they can help the business run better. This is important because we sometimes see in these discussions that people get back into their siloed mentality because they're afraid. They're afraid that somebody is going to see what they're doing, and that's a threat. And the change in mindset that's required here is that when people see what you're doing and they're all working towards the same goal to improve the business and make it more efficient and produce more widgets, whatever they're producing, or produce more bulk liquid product, then everybody is in the same boat. They're on the same team. And it shouldn't be seen as a threat that you're opening up your data, but it should be seen as the greater benefit to the community because you, in turn, also benefit from having fewer resource constraints. So the digital transformation is a strategy where the management comes in and supports you as shop floor operators in improving your day-to-day life and listening to your advice about what could be made better for the business. But it relies on having all the right data at the right time. So data should really be treated as the precious commodity. You need to record what happens, not what you think you need to record, but what actually happens. And everything goes from there. So I don't know if I did such a good job explaining it succinctly, but you tell me.
Yeah, if I may try maybe slightly different short version of it, at least as I feel it. So digitalization is basically, it's just a step. It's an easy goal in some cases not so easy, but still it's just a one step in the right direction, but it's a finite result. Okay. So if I have paper, my next step to digitalize that would be Excel. If I have Excel, my next step to digitalize that might be some kind of more systematic tool that does the thing that I'm after. And I'm done. At that point, I'm done. The digitalization is over, right? I mean, what else is there? So now, instead of Excel, I'm using some kind of tool that does the job that I wanted my Excel to do originally. Now I have a tool for it. I'm happy. Digitalization complete, right? That's pretty much what that is. But digital transformation, the word transformation in it implies a long running process. It's a journey, it's a strategy. It's not a step. It's a long sequence of many, many steps. It's a mindset. It's a long-term goal that you may never get to because there is no such thing as like putting a stake down, say, okay, I'm digitally transformed. There's always more. There's always better. There's always things to do. But if with the right approach, with the right strategy, that is the bread, I guess, of the digital transformation. It's going towards the state of having data that is unified, accessible, actionable, and actionable at the level of the whole enterprise in real time. So people at every level of decision making can actively use that data to improve the overall business. And that starts at the floor, like Konstantin said, with the operators that do the actual work, because they are the knowledge walking around your plants, because they know exactly how the sausage is made and they can provide the best input. It starts with digitizing and collecting all the possible data from all possible devices so that you minimize data error input from humans. And it goes all the way up to the highest level of management in the company, and they all see and can access an action on the data that is collected. The whole point of digital transformation is not to hide the data, but to make sure that it's collected, it's accessible and actionable at every level. That's what the digital transformation is. So it's not just a narrow thing like, oh, I just used a new tool, so I'm done. No, it's a journey. It will take you a long time to get to the like a very high level of digital transformation, but it's a journey. It's not a step.
Is it possible to say that one company is digitally transformed and the other is not? In other words,
You can say to a level. Yes, digitally transformed to a certain level. So you can say, I don't think there is an ultimate digitally transformed 100%, full stop. I don't think that exists because there's always something you can improve. There's always new pieces of data, new pieces of technology that comes out that can make an impact on what you already have and improve it further. So there's no like an end stage where you say, okay, at this point, I'm fully digitally transformed and there's nothing else for me to do here. I don't think that exists. You can get very high. It's like an exponential thing, right? So you can get closer and closer and closer to that elusive point, but I don't think you will ever get to it completely because
yeah,
it just doesn't make sense.
what I'm hearing both of you say is that even though you can't, it's not a binary thing like you're transformed or not. It's not a yes or no question. But what I'm hearing you say is that there is an inflection point, and that is when you start to open up your data and become transparent and making that data available across functions and across processes. And you suddenly, on the one hand, have people accountable, which can be scary, but it ultimately ends up being a good thing. But on the other hand, a lot of things start to fall in place and start to make sense. And after you've cleaned away all the skeletons that fell out of closets, you really begin to experience good things. Is that accurate to say? So is this like a huge milestone on the journey that's probably never ending? but is
Yeah.
this like that key
Yeah,
inflection point?
yeah, I would say so. And importantly, that you can start small because it's a journey. So it doesn't mean that, okay, let's open everything up right away, immediately, and we're done. No, you can start small. You can start smart. You can say, okay, let's do this part of our business. Let's, collect all the data we can about it. Let's open it up. And then once we know how that goes, once we are comfortable with how that went, let's move on to the next part of the business where we open up the stuff. You can go plant by plant, side by side, whatever the right approach is for your organization, that's the right approach. But just having to remember that it's not a one step and you're done. It's a strategy. It's a journey that would help any plant, any enterprise to go higher and higher in their digital transformation level.
Konstantin, I have another curveball for you. You make it sound like digital transformation is this great thing that is a very good thing to have. But at what point would you say that it's a must-have and that companies don't actually have a choice? The question is not whether or not you get on this journey, but when. And if that when is too late, or if the effort and the execution are insufficient, your plant or your operations are going to be in danger. To put it in another way, if you think about it, like let's say 20 years down the line, we're probably not even going to recognize manufacturing plants. Like they'll just be so out of this world from like how we see it today, from our today's perspective. Like they'll definitely be very far along this digital transformation journey. 10 years down the line, also probably 100% of manufacturing plants. Like in 10 years from now, we'll not only have self-driving cars, we'll have self-flying cars probably. And so it's going to be out of this world. So when does the time come, or where is that point when you say, okay, this is no longer just a great thing and a nice to have, but it's a matter of, I don't want to be dramatic, but it's a matter of life and death. So opening up your data, stepping on the path and making sufficient progress, and sooner or later, it's just gonna, there are no plants that don't use computers today, because if there were, then they're probably out of business, at least in the developed world. So where do you see this? Well, that's a long question, I know, but just feel free to jam on this.
Thank you for that question, Dan, and especially thank you for providing the question and answering it in the question too. I love this question because it goes to the bigger picture, to the economics, if you will, and to global competition. So I can tell you in abstract and from real examples, it kind of converges for me very easily. So it's really, while it's a big question, it's easy to answer. And how would I answer it? I'd say you look at your competition. That's it. So we, Eugene and I, traveled to a few manufacturing plants in China a number of years ago, and we saw large manufacturing plants with thousands of people working in them. One was more automated than the other, but both still relied on a lot of manual execution. And what was the key observation there? It was that at the time, the cheap manual labor was economically good enough for those manufacturing plants to keep doing what they were doing, right? So companies don't change unless there is an outside driving force that forces them to change. And if you fast forward now, there are many more companies in China that are also going through this journey. They might not be at the same level as Amazons and Teslas of the world, but they're picking up. And so that brings me back to what we have with the US manufacturers. If you're making a certain product, you look at your competition. Your competition might have already started down this journey of digital transformation. And they may be a step, 2 steps, or 3 steps above where you are. And that may be a reason why they might be taking your business away. So the explanation is very simple. If you don't do this, the competition drives the business away. So then the question is, well, when do I start? You can start now. It's look at your competition. If you are the only one producing a certain product and there's nobody else, and you get this constant demand and you don't need to improve anything, they'll still come. Well, of course, then you don't need to improve anything. But how many manufacturing plants are in that situation? I don't know any. I thought when I visited those in China that they were doing something very interesting. There was a lot of manual work and they were still happy. But even they are going to automate stuff. And they, again, have different plants at different stages of this, but they're catching up. So then you come back into European market and into North America and Latin America and say, and what are you doing? If everybody else is already doing it. So that's kind of like everybody knows usually who their competitors are. So just look at your competitors, see what they're doing. Is their business growing faster than yours? If so, why? could you be doing anything to improve your operation so that your business is the one that they admire? That's really the conversation. So to me, I love this kind of discussion, but the answer is really easy. It's you look at the big picture, and when is the right time? Now. Now is the right time to start. Yesterday, but you weren't there yesterday. So that's my answer.
That's a good one. That's a good answer. I would also say that we're not going to have flying cars in 10 years or even 20, maybe never. It never meaning in like any foreseeable future. But digital transformation is a thing you can get on board with today, tomorrow, the day after tomorrow. You don't have to go full bore right away, and potentially that may be scary, for some people. So like I said before, you could start small, you could start smart, and see how it really works for your particular case. And yes, competition is something that will eventually drive everybody to this strategy, right? Because you can only survive so long until there's no other survival path but to get on board with the program, right? The sooner you get on with the program, the better your position is going to be a few years down the line. Now, this digital transformation is a mindset and strategy that existed for a few years already. It's not new this year. And still, we're seeing a lot of manufacturers that are not doing this, right? So it will take time. The adoption will take time. But the sooner you get on board, the better off you're going to be versus your competition that is taking time and not looking into this just yet. So get on board.
To kind of take it back to the discussion of the journey from Excel in production scheduling to some kind of tool that does it nicer versus digital transformation, one of the metrics we didn't mention, and it's an important one, is OTIF. We briefly mentioned it but didn't explain it. So on time and in full. And what I wanted to reiterate is that when all of your nodes in the ecosystem, so production scheduling, part of manufacturing execution system, your shipping schedule, part of transportation management system, or the overall big system, your quality control lab stuff, your LIMS system, lab information management, when all of this is integrated, you are able to have quicker response time, and you can see issues as they come up. Sometimes you can foresee issues, you can predict issues. And so besides the quality and OEE metrics, this on time and in full metric, basically it improves because now you will reduce rework and reduce downtime, and you will have greater capacity to make product on time. So the on time component is improved. In full component just refers to how accurately you fill the orders, what was ordered versus what you actually supplied. And this is easier in discrete manufacturing, but in continuous process manufacturing, this tends to have some variance. And so the better you are at seeing all the data in one place, the better you can fill your orders. Now, when you have on time and in full both improving, that's your customer satisfaction. So that's where I wanted to bring this back to, that you can think of, yes, I am going to just improve the life of my production scheduler by giving them some kind of tool that's better than Excel. Or you can think, I'm actually going to make the plant run better, and I'm going to improve the customer satisfaction because my metrics are going to go up and the customers will want to do more business with me. So that's an important one. And of course, for later episodes, we can talk more about the AI topic that Eugene brought up. And I think that people don't appreciate, and this is like the majority of plant managers right now, don't appreciate how you need to accumulate the data to be able to benefit from machine learning and AI. So the concepts of contextualization and normalization are usually not discussed at plant manager level. And so in our future episodes, we can talk about that the digital transformation, when done the right way, also has mechanisms for collecting that data correctly so that when the AI comes to look at it, it's all contextualized, it's all together. One data point is tied to another data point. There is that structural relationship between them, because if you just look at them in isolation, AI won't be able to do a thing for you. So that is important. And the digital transformation gives you order to this madness of data accumulation. So we'll talk about things like the unified namespace in upcoming episodes. But today I just wanted to leave you with this thought that yes, it's my OEE, my right first time, my on time and in full, that will go up as a result of making a conscious choice to embark on the digital transformation journey. But also, I'm going to create a platform for future machine learning and AI pattern finding, which is actually going to work. So that's important.
Gentlemen, thank you for this episode. I think it's been one of the more dense episodes where we covered probably more ground than any time previously in this series of events in the Efficiency Equation podcast. So thank you so much for this. We are certainly going to go back to digital transformation and improving metrics and everything else that we talked about. So this is just the beginning, as they say. So see you in episode 17. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Dan.
Thank you.